Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and today I have a fellow PPC candidate here with me, Mr. Larry Gratton. How's it going, Larry?
Very well, Payman. Thanks very much.
Larry, I feel ashamed. One day I didn't wear a shirt and tie. You come up looking really sharp, so apologies for that. Yeah.
Oh, don't apologize to me. I don't often squeeze into this kind of garb, but I just followed the instructions on that your assistant sent me.
Let's hope that you set an example for everyone else to follow, and we'll stop getting candidates showing up in like t-shirts.
Hmm.
um, Larry, I guess to get things started, so you're a PPC candidate. Can you quickly tell us, what riding you're running in?
I'll be running in the Ponoka-Didsbury riding in Alberta, which is one of the newly configured or redistributed ridings, uh, created out of the former Red Deer Lacombe riding and Red Deer Mountain View ridings. So now the city of Red Deer and a couple of communities to the southeast of it are a riding of their own called Red Deer. And sort of the crescent from north to the west and south of Red Deer in the Highway 2 corridor here in Alberta is the new Ponoka-Didsbury riding.
I always respect a candidate that knows the boundaries of their riding. I hope that I never have to describe mine. It's massive. It's like a weird shape, and there's an island in it as well.
Right.
Uh, Larry, I guess let's get started with maybe if you could tell the audience a little about yourself. I'll leave it to you how much detail you want to go into.
Well, sure. No problem. I'm a husband, father of 5 grown kids, grandfather to 15. Um, we live we live on the family farm near Sundre, Alberta, and um, the farm itself is run by my youngest son right now. So I'm one of his principal hands, I guess. Um, And besides that, I still work full time. I started off my career in a trade, pivoted to healthcare, and I still work. Well, I dabbled in management for a number of years, but I've come back to working frontline as an advanced care paramedic, and I do that full time now. Still.
That's pretty impressive. Hey, Prairie, I see you there in the comments. Good evening. Prairie says hi. She's a
Hi, Prairie.
regular follower. Um, yeah, that's really impressive. So the one thing that I was thinking as you were telling me that was the Canadian dream. Like you have land, you're living on a farm, so you're self-sufficient. You have 5 beautiful children, 15 grandchildren. I don't know. I guess you feel blessed. Would I be accurate to say that?
Oh, absolutely. It's what keeps me going, and that's 15 good reasons there to try and fix this country.
Right. So I guess 20. You said 15 grandchildren and 5 children,
Yeah,
so that's 20,
yeah.
20 plus
Okay.
one for your wife.
Well, the five grown kids can fend for themselves, but yeah, I've got 15 younger reasons to go all in on this project.
Um, Before getting to that, you mentioned you have a farm. What do you guys? What kind of a farm is it?
It's the boy is running a cow calf operation. It's called. So yeah, he keeps a brood herd of cows and a couple of bulls, and basically grows up cows.
Cool. And then, sorry for prodding into your personal life, but is that farm like you handed down and you grew up there? Do you have like a kinship with the land there?
Yeah, and that's fine. Feel free to probe. And from. Um, it was my wife's stepfather's farm. So we got married. We moved to the farm, and while I was working shift work in my job, I was helping the father-in-law with all of the stuff, calving, putting up hay, and all of that. We did have a few small herd of our own, but then I changed jobs to a management job, an office job, and gave up the shift work. So it wasn't practical to farm at the same time. So we got out of it. But now, as I said, my youngest son has taken over his grandfather's farm.
So, do you see any like a disconnect? How do I phrase this delicately? Are you seeing that in the urban centers, the ordinary Canadians now they don't have that same sense of responsibility? Like, do you sense that? If so, how?
Well, I think a lot don't really appreciate where their food comes from. Alberta's arguably less uninformed, if I could use that double negative, as say Toronto or Vancouver, urbanites. I think in Alberta, even city folks have a fairly good appreciation of how important agriculture is, and that it's where their food comes from. Um, it's been a long time since I used to live in the outskirts of Toronto as a youth, um, but my impression is that urbanites there are probably less dialed into their food chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I've lived in both Toronto and Vancouver, and there's a you live in those cities, and you really believe that food grows in the grocery store. Like that's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one problem. Um, what about so you went from your private life, farm, and then healthcare work, and now you've entered into politics. What prompted you to do that?
Well, I've always been attentive to the news and um, always enjoyed ranting with my colleagues about the state of the union and politics. And then my wife actually got connected through a church group, I believe, or a ladies group with someone working for the PPC here in Alberta, and she was the president of our riding association. And so we met, and I kind of got drafted as a riding director, and I helped with um, one general election campaign for our candidate here, for the PPC candidate here, and then he also ran in a by-election uh, afterward, and I helped with that. And yeah, over the course of late summer and fall here, it was looking like an election was imminent, and we had to get ready. So I agreed to run.
No, that's really good. That's impressive, and I haven't heard that story where sort of like a church and an existing EDA they tried to bring you into the fold, but that's good. Yeah, so I guess so no history, previous history in politics, and then you decide to get involved in with the PPC. Um, were you at all scared? Like for me, I have no shame in saying this. Like I was very very hesitant at first because I still am a very private person, and I didn't want to get the bad press or anything. What about you? Were you scared at all?
Yeah, to run, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm also private person, I would say. And yeah, given the choice, like I'm quite comfortable in small groups, and I did quite a bit of instructing at work, so I can stand in front of a classroom and teach as long as it's something I know real well. Um, but yeah, it I'm not. How should I say this? I, I'm not terribly nervous about it, but it's it's going to be, it is and is going to be a great experience and will contribute to my development, I'm sure, at this late stage in life. But um, it's not something I would do for fun, shall we say? But
Yeah.
it's important that people do this now.
Got some feedback from the audience. Prairie again. She's saying, "Great to have you with the PPC."
Oh well, thank you, Prairie.
I had a question going back. So I asked you earlier why you ran, and I guess you answered how you got involved with the PPC. But what about like the state of Canada? Um, would it be something that happened in the last 4 or 5 years with COVID that alarms you? Is it something with the Trudeau administration, 2015, or is this something like earlier, the 90s, the 80s?
Well, I can't remember actually when government was like really good in Canada. Um, like so let's say when I was probably 14 or 15 years old when Trudeau Senior was running things, and and that's when we lived near Toronto, and there was all this Trudeau mania um, going on. Oh, have we lost our connection, Payne?
No, I hear you.
Oh, okay. The
Can you?
screen froze there. Um, yeah, so as a kid, I lived through Trudeau mania in a suburb of Toronto, and I remember once he helicoptered into our community to the arena parking lot, and of course all the teenage girls were going crazy, and but uh, it wasn't good then, and it hasn't been good since. With the possible exception of a glimmer of hope when the Reform Party formed the opposition for a couple of years there. That's when there seemed to be um, some pressure to improve in the House of Commons and in government. But that was short-lived. I think they made a huge mistake in uniting the right, and Stephen Harper led them basically back into the the old style political party of the Conservatives. So I can't remember when it was really good.
So let me pick your brain on that one because the Reform Party is a little bit before my time. I just wasn't. I was a kid and I wasn't involved in politics. What was the appeal of the Reform Party, and what did they do wrong that you said that caused its demise?
Um, well, the Reform Party basically started in Alberta and British Columbia, Western Canada, under the leadership of Preston Manning. Their first MP was Deborah Gray, who won in a by-election, and I'm not going to be able to recall the years of these events, but then in the following election, uh, a significant number of Reform MPs were elected, including including from the riding I live in here. That was old Myron Thompson, was our MP for a number of years. But they were grassroots. They were principled. Um, they, I think it was 40 or 46 or more that were elected, and they actually went and formed the opposition against Jean Chrétien's government. But that bunch, like they were grassroots. They went to Ottawa. They didn't go to Ottawa to make friends or participate in socializing with other MPs. They went there strictly for business, and they were trying to turn this country in a rightward direction. And where I think it went wrong is Preston Manning and Stephen Harper decided, and they convinced. Now I'm not even going to remember who the Conservative leader was at the time, but they decided they needed to unite the right in the hope of forming government, which they did. But the Conservatives, even at that time, weren't all that right. They were still a progressive party. So the Reform joined with the Progressive Conservatives, and basically they were absorbed, and now we're right back the way it was before they existed. With they call themselves Conservative Party of Canada, but they're the Progressive Conservatives again.
How did that happen? If the Reform Party outnumbered the Progressive Conservative Party, how did the latter manipulate the former?
Now we're getting into an area that I am not expert in at all. I only I've been reading Preston Manning's book, but I haven't finished it yet. So I'm not able to answer that question directly. But my sense is that it was probably the biggest driving force of it was Stephen Harper, and ultimately he brilliantly took control of things and obviously became the leader of the party and prime minister. So,
how does Stephen Harper fit into this at this point? Was he just a Reform Party MP?
I'm going to say yes. I'm not positive, but I believe he was sort of in the inner circle with Preston Manning running the Reform Party.
So I'm just going to interpret that as Stephen Harper said, we should try to drift to the center to pick up as many seats. Probably what happened.
I think that's how it worked out. Yeah.
Okay. And then I know I'm dwelling on this a lot, but I find this fascinating. The Pierre Trudeau administration, I find like the worst thing that he did was hand over the central bank to the commercial bankers, and then our debt exploded. Do you see it the same way, or do you see that he did something else that was really bad?
Now you might have to educate me on that history actually a little bit. When you say he
sorry,
handed over to the central bankers, was that the point at which Canada gave up the gold standard and basically adopted the fiat currency model?
Yeah. So first of all, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just I didn't really. I'm such a nerd. In 1974, we switched from the central bank giving interest-free loans to itself to Pierre Trudeau's like we should go to the commercial banks and we should get loans at interest to keep us responsible. And then if you just look at a graph like 1974, this is tied to the whole Bretton Woods in the US. But I can ask the question a different way. Like, if there was one single thing that you think Pierre Elliott Trudeau did, like, what was the worst thing that he did to this country besides Justin Trudeau?
Well, that's where I almost went. I think just he was basically just drove us, led us just that much farther towards socialism overall. Was there one particular thing? I mean, um, his whole time as in government was, boiling us like frogs to become socialists.
No, I can accept that. Okay, last question. I promise. We're going to move on. I'm always fascinated when I meet Canadians and I ask them this question. Growing up, what was the in your community, your family, friends, maybe around when you were 10 years old to 20? What was the perception of the direction Canada was going in? Did the majority of people say, "Yeah, this is a positive direction we're going in with socialism, going more and more socialism," or were people then saying, "We don't want this. Why is Trudeau bringing this socialism?"
Um, so, in my childhood, and I'll confess, it's fuzzy now, but uh, I don't think that was top of mind around the dinner table of my parents and aunts and uncles. And our family originated in Montreal, actually, and we were Anglophones. And so oh, let's see, I was born in 57. So probably by 63 or 65, my father picked us up and we moved to Toronto area, outside of Toronto, uh, what's now Brampton, actually. And and uh, and then he got transferred to Calgary, and then um, his brother and brother-in-law and their families followed out to Calgary. They basically picked up and left Montreal. And so what was top of mind or on their minds at the time wasn't so much the direction Canada was going, but the direction Quebec was going. And so their priority was to start their new lives in the West. So basically, that makes me really unable to answer your question, your original question about how how the family or the grown-ups in the family felt about Trudeau and the Liberal government at the time. We actually, on just as a little side note, a tidbit about me. My dad got transferred back to Quebec City in 69 or 70. So we had a front row seat for the FLQ crisis that occurred at that time. And I can recall, going on the school bus to junior high school, and there was armed soldiers on the street corners and guarding the residents of Quebec City, the suburb of Quebec that we lived in was St. Foy. Lots of senior government employees living in that community. So there were armed guards on the corners, street corners, and in front of certain houses, um, on the lookout for the FLQ, I guess. And then from there
What
we moved back to Toronto. So.
that's pretty interesting. The FLQ crisis. Um, what was it like at the time? Like, were you guys in a state of terror? Like it was almost a war zone, and you thought you could
No,
die at any moment?
no, nobody felt threatened. I mean, um, the Cross and Laporte kidnappings had happened. I believe they were. I don't recall if they one was released and one was killed, but I don't recall if that happened before we moved away again back to my dad's job was over, so we moved back to Toronto area. Um, but there was no sense of panic. Kids went on the school bus to school, and life was pretty normal. Just the um, sort of the image of soldiers on the street and their military vehicles parked here and there, but I don't recall any panic or worry.
Okay. So we went on a serious tangent there, but if we go
Hmm.
back to the original question I was going to ask you was, why did you decide to run for the People's Party? You kind of answered this already, and not instead of the Conservative Party.
Um, well, I followed, and I'm not going to recall if my wife and I were members of the Conservative Party at the time. We were for a little bit, but I'm not sure the timing. But I recall the leadership race basically between Maxime Bernier and Andrew Scheer. And um, reading the news about that and hanging out with agricultural people here, it was evident that there was some skullduggery around that leadership election, and um, I I personally thought um, the policy ideas that Maxime brought to that leadership race were dead on. In particular, the supply management. Um, um, well, that one in particular. Um, so I thought he would have been the better choice for the Conservative Party. And basically, since that time, I followed what the Conservatives were doing and followed what the People's Party um, ideas and platform were. And I am I am solidly aligned with the People's Party platform. There is there's really nothing in it I take issue or disagree with. Um, and what I like about it too is there's been a few tweaks to it based um, owing to certain conditions changing, particularly around immigration and things like that. So there's been a few tweaks to the PPC platform, but it's basically exactly the same thing and as it as its original form. And I really respect that because my idea of, I guess you would call it the um, populism by definition, but our party is presented the ideas and we'll explain them and we'll try to sell them and we'll try to convince people. But those are the ideas, that's the platform we're running on. And I watch the Conservative Party policy wise and philosophically bend like a reed in the wind. Um, whatever they sense people want to hear, that's what they'll come up with next. And when it's quite amusing what's happened right now, um, because Trump has handed the government and the uniparty a crisis that they can really work with and and use to their advantage. So now the uniparty is basically all online with the conservative party's platform of axing the tax and all of that stuff. So Pierre Poilievre has had to come up with something to distinguish himself now from the other two. So apparently, just in the last day or two, that's going to be a big military base in the Arctic. And but like they just pull things out of thin air that they think people will latch onto. But our approach is this is our platform. This is what we intend to do when we form government, or even when we have that influence or hammer over a minority government. These are the things that we will try and get done. And you can like it or not, yes. But we'll educate you as to the good reasons for it. But we're not going to change because we think the public would like to hear something different.
This is you and I are not breaking any new ground. This is people have finally woken up to the fact that the Conservative Party exclusively looks to polling. Pierre Poilievre's got the world's biggest index finger. He does that sailor thing where he puts it out to the wind. And if it's polling 51%, like you said, Arctic will differentiate ourselves. He's leaned into abolishing interprovincial trade. He's got this position on unified trucker licensing. One of his candidates came out recently, and he was talking about oligopolies and government caused monopolies. And it's like you don't even need to mark down the election in your calendar. You just look to see when they start pandering. You're like, oh, must be an election around the corner.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that. The Arctic one, I saw that, but I didn't look into it. But it's just I feel for Pierre because like he's got to distinguish himself somehow. The Liberals already came out and they said they want to do a moratorium on immigration. He must be panicking. There's only so many policies that he can steal from us before he starts coming out with some of his own.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, all his good ones he took from the PPC anyway. So
yeah, you get used to it, I guess. I always joke to people. I say, I don't have to like it, but I see what they're doing. But as the PPC, you just kind of grind on, and you're doing it for your country, I guess.
well, we are, and I guess we could console ourselves that look at the influence we're having.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess our ultimate goal is to get some seats, to get people who are, in the words of Max, who are not morally and bankrupt. So we want people who stand on good policy, good values, as opposed to ones who just pander.
Mm-hmm. And Payman, as I said earlier, I've watched a number of your interviews with candidates, and I have to say, what I'm seeing there is like the salt of the earth. These are not career politicians. They're not. We are not trying to position ourselves at the trough. Um, we are there. We're going to go there to do a job and represent our constituents that sent us there. Like I still don't consider myself a politician at all. I'm basically applying for a job to represent the people of this riding.
I'm going to name drop two individuals, Rick Dignard of Independent BC and Peter McIsaac of Independent Nova Scotia. They run support services for independent candidates. And they said what you really want to do is you want to go to someone and you ask them if they want to be a candidate as a leader. And if they say no, that's the person you want. like if they're quick to jump to say yes, they're probably not the right person for the job.
Yeah. Well, I haven't used the term in quite a little while, but when I was first approached by some people on our board in the PPC, basically said I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than go to Ottawa. But here I am. So,
That's a terrifying thought. Like you do your best and you try to get in, and then you actually win, and you're like, oh no, I got to go to Ottawa.
well, I mean, it's a beautiful city. I visited a number of times. I will do fine there.
I used to live there when I was a kid for 1 year in 1989. Uh, Thankfully, it was too cold for, so my father got us out of there. I went back, the Freedom Convoy, and the year after. I wouldn't want to live there. I could handle Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, but not Ottawa.
I have some family there, so hopefully I'll have things to do.
At least you have a place to stay. You don't have to pay for overpriced rent. Oh.
Yeah. Listen to us talking like I should be buying a plane ticket already.
It's all about planning ahead. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm going to hit you with a devil's advocate question. I'll probably follow it up with a couple more hard ones. What do you say to the argument that like the PPC is never going to win? It's too much of a long shot. Why don't you get behind the Conservative Party and I don't know, try to reform it from the inside out?
Well, Payman, that's been tried for generations. Um, and that's what Preston Manning tried to do when the reform folded into the Conservative Party. It won't happen. They won't be reformed. There is a culture in Canadian and evidently in U.S. politics, and I'm going to say it's worldwide politics. There's a culture of, and there's no other word for it than corruption. Um, the those parties are in the business of running their parties like major corporations. The MPs that align themselves and join those parties or win seats for those parties are not representing their constituents. They basically it's the power or the representation is the opposite way. They represent the party to their constituents. They are like franchisees dishing out what the party is serving. Um, well, like I said, I'm reading Preston's book here. He called it old style politics, which was I'm gonna not get it exactly here, but the blatant, constant, persistent, and sanctioned, basically, use of taxpayers' money for partisan political purposes. So anything you see or have ever seen these parties do as far as programs, um, purchasing, procurement, it's all done with an eye, how do we strengthen our party and our party's position? And as we're finding out, often it's how do we it's not only the party, but how do we enrich our party supporters and friends at the same time? So that's why you see these, any big procurement, um, it will, instead of the government department just doing the procurement, it goes through intermediate consultants, and they all take their cut. And we've seen that with mask procurement, vaccine procurement. Um, um, and I'll be honest with you, this this is all such a blur to me now. All of these horror stories of the corruption that I can't even distinguish them from each other anymore, except at a high level to say, um, there's the one recent one where I can't even remember what they were buying or what program they were spending the money on, but it had to go through an indigenous company. So some
Oh,
liberal,
Cocaine Randy.
well, that was
Uh,
one, yeah, but there was another one that they they were dishing out money for something, and it had to go through an indigenous company. So somebody stepped up and said, "Yeah, our company is indigenous," and they like their commission to broker that program was more than the money that actually went to the original intended purpose. So, and that happens all the time. I mean, even in Brian Mulrooney's government, when they bought the fighter jets, and there needed to be a contractor to service them. So hands down, the best bid for that job was, I think it was Bristol Aerospace out of Winnipeg. And but Brian Mulrooney and cabinet decided that no, that contract has to go to someone in Montreal, Canadair, I guess, because they needed to strengthen the Conservatives needed to strengthen their position in Quebec. So that's the way it's done. So it's not. It's been tried multiple times. You can't join a party like that, any of those three parties, four parties, and expect to change them from the inside out. You would just be wasting your time and relegated to a never speaking backbench position with them. So
no,
not
it's an
going to
excellent
happen.
answer. It was an excellent and comprehensive answer. Thank you. What do we got, Larry? We're at 42 minutes. Maybe we got time for two more questions. Here's one of like, tell us about your riding. Um, I imagine it's a rural riding, but like, what are the issues that are important to your constituents?
So the writing is quite a mix. It is predominantly rural, but there's bedroom communities to Red Deer. And then the rural mix is half agriculture, I would say, and half like upstream oil industry exploration and production, and the services that are required for that. Um, so very conservative. Um, so that's kind of the demographic. Uh, the issues are um, basically transfer payments is huge, and pipelines to get Alberta's oil exported. And basically, the overarching sentiment that Alberta has always just been a contributor to Confederation is not respected. Um, there's that old political cartoon that's like 100 years old, where it's a cow across the map of Canada, and the cow's head is in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and they're feeding it hay, and the udders are in Ontario and Quebec, and guys in top hats and tails are milking it. And that's the sentiment in Alberta and has been for a long time.
To add insult to injury on your behalf, there are people who try to downplay the importance of Alberta to Canada. They're like, "Oh, oil's not that important. Their GDP is not that high." You guys should try exclusively exporting your oil to America for 1 year and see what happens to Canada.
Well, that is the only place we export it, and even the little bit that we send down east to Sarnia, at least, has to traverse through the United States because there's no pipeline between us and Eastern Canada.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah. Well, Premier Klein here suggested that we should let them freeze in the dark there, but that's not going to play well anyway. And and we're not those kind of people. Like there is becoming a sovereignist or separatist movement in Alberta, and it's becoming significant. And you know what? If it wasn't for the PPC, I would probably be aligned with them, because something has to change. So, what I'm telling people here is, Pierre Poilievre is going to form the next government, probably with a sizable majority. And we all know that the government is going to be decided before the electoral wave gets past Manitoba. But if Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, if we were able to send a decent number of grassroots PPC MPs to Ottawa to hopefully hold the balance of power over the Conservative government and steer them in the right direction. And that's what all Canadians should think about here. Conservatives and Poilievre are going to form the next government, like I say, with a majority, but they should seriously think about who the opposition should be, and it should be us.
That would be a dream, to sending a couple of candidates from the Western provinces, because not only would they be grassroots candidates, so no more of this unit party nonsense, but they would be Western. So they'd be more common sense. Like, you're not just catering to Quebec.
Yeah, although I have to say, listening to Maxine and the podcasts I've seen yourself and Jason Levine do, there's a lot of right thinking or correct thinking people in Quebec, and I think our candidates there are they're grassroots as well, and they're on point.
Yeah, I guess I fell for the CBC propaganda where they try to get all of Canada to hate Quebec.
Yeah, well, I've lived there. It's beautiful. French was my first language in elementary school, actually, but I've since lost it all.
Language is a muscle, and if you don't use it, you lose it.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's see. I could ask you. We have time for one more question.
Sure.
Here's a tough one because I didn't prepare you for this. I believe the PPC has 21 policy platforms. I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite one, or which one do you think is most important? Just to give you time to prepare for that, I'll tell you what mine are. The three ones I really like are freedom of speech, the right to self-defense, and the right gun rights. And the reason that those three are the most important to me, because I see them all as an expression of property rights. So, you own your body, you own your mind, so you have freedom of speech and expression, security of the person, you have a right to defend yourself, and guns are a form of property. So if they want to steal your car or your house, they come after the guns first because it's low hanging fruit. What about you? What do you like about the policies?
Well, as I said before, I like them all. I think they're all rock solid. The three you mentioned certainly play very well in the West here. Um, but I would say the most important one for us all right now is, and it's kind of blending two policies together here. It's interprovincial trade and pipelines, because I think interprovincial trade includes us being able to transport oil to refineries in Sarnia, Montreal, New Brunswick. Um, that's just more interprovincial trade, and it's just hugely frustrating how um, the Liberal governments, in particular, um, try and suppress Alberta and the West, and Conservative governments have done nothing about it. But you know, to not be able to export Alberta oil to Tidewater, except for the Trans Mountain pipeline that recently opened, but to not permit tanker traffic. Here's their contradiction. They don't permit tanker traffic. Well, they permit tanker traffic, but not if it's carrying Alberta oil to go down the coast of British Columbia. But they do permit tanker traffic up the St. Lawrence Seaway. So from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or wherever they can buy it. So this is the contradiction, and what Albertans see as blatant discrimination against Alberta, and it's just to keep us in our place. So anyway, my favorite, what I see as the most important policies are interprovincial trade, and with that, the ability for us to send Alberta oil and Saskatchewan oil to Eastern Canada to process there.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. What was it? The premier of Quebec recently came out and he said, "Over my dead body, will we allow pipeline through Quebec?"
Yeah, you better be careful. Some Albertan might accommodate him on that, but yeah, yeah, and we are. I can't remember the psychological term for it, but where we pay attention to what we agree with most, or we focus on that. But when I hear PPC candidates from Quebec say that, well, that's just the Quebec government that feels that way. The rank and file Quebecer does not, and would certainly permit a pipeline, and would rather buy Canadian gasoline than Middle Eastern or Venezuelan gasoline. So, so of course, I want to believe our PPC people who tell us that. So I don't know if the Quebec premier is just that out of tune with his electorate, or if he's right. Who to believe?
It just reminded me of something I read a while ago about South America. I don't know, 1700s, 1800s, and why it never developed. One of the reasons was the landowning class, the aristocracy. They would buy the land, but they wouldn't develop it. They just lock it up, and whatever goods they purchased, they would purchase from Europe. Part of the reason was because the quality was higher. But the thing is, Canada's sort of doing the same thing. We got so much crown land, the government's locking it up, and they're buying Middle Eastern oil, and it's really hurting the people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just let us, drill and mine and harvest timber and let us grow.
Exactly. Um, who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of theories. I think it's generally accepted now that our government takes its marching orders from the World Economic Forum and the UN. Um, so it must be them directing that, because why wouldn't you use your own products first and employ your own people and use Canadian steel for a Canadian pipeline? There's no good reason not to, except that somebody with power somewhere is preventing it.
Yeah, this seems like it more and more. Larry, how about I let you have the final words? Yeah, hit us with something optimistic, some words of hope. I know
Well,
it's a difficult job, but
I've kind of spent all my best ammo already. I'll go back to, I guess it'll be a reiteration. Uh, Pierre Poilievre's going to form the next government. It'll be a majority. Canadians, Western Canadians in particular, well, all Canadians need to think about who the opposition party should be. And if they would consider looking at the PPC platform and actually reading it, you'll see it makes the best sense. It's rock solid. Our candidates are not particularly politicians. We are grassroots people who are in it to represent our own constituents. And Western Canada in particular will have nothing to lose by trying out some PPC candidates. Like I say, the government is going to be set before the electoral wave hits Manitoba, and so there's no risk to Western Canada to send some PPC MPs down there.
absolutely. Let's see, Larry. I'm gonna bring up your profile page so we can tell the people where to go to follow you. You shared that slide with me, but then you stopped sharing. So while I share this guy, if you could share that with me again, I will. I'm gonna. So here's Larry Gratton for Ponoka-Didsbury, Alberta. You can go check him out at the People's Party of Canada.ca website. If you hit this little bad boy right here under About, you can go to Candidates, and you can actually search for Larry here, LARR, and you'll show up. Or you could just do the writing. What was your writing again?
Ponoka-Didsbury.
Oh, sweet. PIN?
P
How do you write
O
Ponoka?
N PONO.
There he is. See, so you just start typing your writing, and there he is. He shows up right there. The magic of the internet. Did you manage to get your slide shared?
I think
Oops.
so.
Oh yeah, you got your donation page set up. Yeah, I'll bring that up in a second. So if you just click on donate here, you can actually donate to his campaign directly. So there you go, easy peasy.
I'm not seeing that one. That's on the PPC webpage.
Yes, I don't know if it's automatically set up for everyone, but if you go down and if you click on donate, it comes to the donate page. Since you tweaked my curiosity, let's see if there's a donate one set up for me. I just get donations through my website. Yeah, there's a donate button. Yeah, so ours we have our own website for donations, so we get this ugly page. Anyhow, going back to yours, if people want to follow Larry, you can go through Facebook, Larry Gratton PPC. You can go through X, Gratton PPC Gratton underscore PPC. And your email is Larry Gratton underscore PPC at protonmail.com. So
Correct.
there you have it, guys. If you're in Larry's riding, if you want to support him, send him an email, offer to volunteer. If you want to donate, you can go to his PPC website and help Larry get into Parliament.
And if you want to follow me, that picture is what I look like from behind.
Oh, that's you. I thought it was a stock photo. Is this a hobby of yours?
No, I was very fortunate to get to go on a sheep hunt with my son. So
Is this in Alberta?
yeah.
That's a distinctly Canadian, a snow cowboy. No, that's very good. All right, Larry. Mr. Gratton, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'm looking forward to getting you back on at some point. Best of luck to your campaign, and if you need any help, you can always reach out.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Have a wonderful day.
You as well.